My son, the very child I carried in my womb, the boy whose fevered brow I cooled with my own hands, the same child I fed before I fed myself, stood before me one morning and told me to leave his house. No anger, no shame, just coldness. He said his wife wanted privacy, that I was in the way. I looked at him, searching for the son I once knew, but all I saw was a stranger wearing my child's face. I did not argue, I did not beg. I simply folded my shawl, picked up my little bag, and walked outside, my heart dragging behind me like a torn piece of cloth. And as I waited on that step, the car pulled up. A black car, shining, quiet, expensive. The door opened, and out stepped the man who once held my son's tiny hands to teach him how to walk. My late husband's brother, my brother-in-law, the man my son believed was long gone, living far away. And the moment my son saw him, his smile vanished, because he knew that the very woman he threw away was the same woman who raised an entire family with her bare hands. The same woman who once fed not only her child, but her nephews, her neighbors, the lost and the hungry. My brother-in-law wrapped his coat around my shoulders and said, "Come home, sister, your place was never here." My son's face crumbled, because he realized too late that the one he pushed out was the very pillar that held his world upright. And I didn't need to say a single word. Sometimes, silence is heavier than any scream. Sometimes, the greatest lesson is simply walking away. They say that a mother's love is the first love a child ever knows, the kind that wraps itself around their tiny bones before they even learn how to speak. I remember the day I first held my son. His eyes were closed, his fists balled up like the world owed him something already, but when I pressed him to my chest, he loosened. He trusted me without knowing my name. I was his warmth. I was his entire world. I used to wake up in the nights just to watch him breathe, to place my finger near his tiny hand and feel how naturally he held on. He was my purpose, my joy, my reason to keep going when life was tearing at every seam in my heart. I sacrificed so much, but I did it gladly. A mother does not count her sacrifices, she simply gives. She gives from a place so deep that even she sometimes forgets how much she has lost in the process. As he grew older, he would call out for me before anyone else. "Mama," he would say, as if that one word solved everything, and for him it did. I wiped his tears. I cleaned his scraped knees. I waited outside his school when he forgot his lunch. I stayed up late when his fever wouldn't break. I prayed for him through every hardship, every exam, every disappointment he couldn't yet understand. I worked sometimes until my back felt like it would split in two. I went hungry some nights so he could eat, but I never once said it out loud. A mother's pride is her silence. She does not need applause. Her reward is seeing her child grow into someone who can stand tall in the world. But somewhere along the path, something shifted. It did not happen in one day or one argument. It happened slowly, like the dimming of a flame that once burned bright. I noticed how his tone hardened when his wife was around. I noticed how he would hesitate before calling me mama, as if the word had become a chore in his mouth. I noticed how my presence, once his comfort, had become something he tolerated only when convenient. And yet, I said nothing, because love makes you patient, and hope makes you blind. The morning he told me to leave, he could not even look me in the eye. His voice did not tremble. There was no guilt hiding in the corners of his expression. He said his wife needed space, that I was interfering. Interfering. Me. The woman who spent decades shaping him into the man he presented to the world. The woman who stayed up through nights of sickness, who taught him how to pray, how to stand, how to respect. But it is often the hands we hold the longest that push us away the hardest. I looked at him carefully, studying the face I once kissed goodnight thousands of times, and for the first time in my life, I could not recognize him. His eyes were the same, his voice the same, but the heart was distant, like a stranger had moved in and taken residence where my beloved son once lived. There was no softness, no memory, just a coldness I never imagined could exist in my child. And yet, I did not fight. I did not raise my voice. I did not remind him of every sacrifice. Love does not need to defend itself. It simply is. I gathered my shawl, the one I have worn through winter after winter, and I folded it gently. I picked up my small bag of belongings, the few things I had brought with me when I moved into his home. I paused only for a moment, not to plead, but to breathe, because the end of something that once felt eternal deserves a moment of stillness. He did not walk me to the door, he simply turned away. And as I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not cold, not warm, just unfamiliar, like the world I had known had shifted slightly to the left, leaving me off balance. I stood there, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel the truth settle into my bones. The child I raised with every fiber of my being had chosen to forget me, not by accident, not by misunderstanding, but by decision. That realization, it is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that does not scream or break. It simply sits inside you like a stone, heavy and unmoving. And yet, even then, even in that moment of abandonment, my heart did not stop loving him. That is the curse and the gift of motherhood. Even when your child cuts you open, the wound bleeds love. Because a mother does not stop, she does not forget, she does not unlove. She simply steps back and lets life teach what she no longer can. When I stepped out of that house, I didn't take anger with me. I didn't take bitterness, or curses, or a single word thrown into the air. I took silence. Heavy, ancient silence, the kind only a mother can carry. There is a kind of heartbreak that does not scream. It does not tear clothes or fall to the floor. It simply sits in the chest, like a stone, pressing against every breath. That was the weight I carried, not because I was weak, but because I had loved deeply. And love, real love, does not need to prove itself in loud moments. It proves itself in how it leaves. I stood outside, feeling the air brush against my face, the same air I once prayed into, whispering blessings for the son who now told me I was in the way. Life has a cruel poetry to it sometimes. A child who once clung to the hem of my clothes now couldn't wait for me to step out of his door, but I didn't break. Oh, my heart cracked. Yes, but I did not shatter. I have been through storms that would drown most people. I have walked through nights so long, I thought morning had forgotten me. Pain does not frighten me anymore. I know how to carry it. I know how to fold it small and tuck it inside my shawl like it is just another thing I must learn to live with. I did not call after him. I did not say, "Son, don't do this." I did not remind him of who I was. If a child forgets the hands that raised him, then no reminder will fix the kind of forgetting that begins in the heart. I simply stepped aside. The world does not end when a door closes behind you. It just changes direction. So I stood there, holding the silence I had earned. Yes, earned. Because silence is not emptiness. It is understanding. Understanding that some lessons cannot be learned through words. They can only be learned through absence. My eyes did not spill tears, not because there weren't any, oh there were oceans waiting behind them, but because I had learned long ago that not every sorrow deserves an audience. Tears are precious things. They belong to moments where love is alive. But here, in this moment, I saw clearly I was not being sent away because I was unwanted. I was being sent away because my presence reminded them of something they did not want to face, a standard of care, of sacrifice, of loyalty that they themselves could not match. Some people cannot bear to be near someone who loves too deeply because it reveals the emptiness in their own giving. Yes, I walked away, but I did not bow my head. I lifted it. I breathed in. I let the world see that I was leaving with my dignity still wrapped around me. I have always believed that a mother is not defined by where she is allowed to stay, but by how she carries herself when she is asked to go. And so I carried myself with grace. Because grace is the only thing life cannot take from you unless you hand it away. There is a quiet strength in not responding, in letting the moment pass without giving it the satisfaction of your hurt. Words spoken in pain are like arrows thrown blindly. They land everywhere except where they matter. So I kept my words inside. My silence was not empty. It was full. Full of every memory of love I had given. Full of the years I raised him. Full of the prayers I whispered for him. That silence was my proof. Proof that the love I had given was real. proof that I did not need to defend it. As I stood there, my shawl wrapped around me, my small bag at my side, I realized something. I was not leaving with less. I was leaving with everything I had always been: a mother, a woman of honor, a giver, a survivor of storms. And him? He was the one left standing at the doorway, holding nothing but his choice. Sometimes silence is not the absence of power. Sometimes silence is the moment you reclaim it. I heard the car long before I saw it. Not loud, not boastful, not the kind that arrives with chaos or attention. No, it came quietly, like something certain of its place in the world. The kind of engine that hums low, deep, steady, like a heartbeat that does not rush for anything or anyone. I stood there on the edge of the steps, my bag at my feet, my hands folded in front of me, not because I was waiting for rescue, but because I had nowhere else to be but myself. And then the car came into view, dark, polished, reflecting the morning light like a calm sea holds the sun. Not a single speck of dust dared touch it. A car like that does not move through streets. It glides. It was the kind of car my son could not afford, even on his best day. The kind of car that did not need to announce wealth. It whispered it, quiet, unbothered, confident. My son stood in the doorway behind me, arms folded, his pride still large enough to block his own view of reason. He didn't expect anything. He thought I would call a taxi, or perhaps walk, or perhaps simply disappear, the way he believed mothers do, quietly, without witnesses. But life has a way of arranging scenes in front of those who need to see them, and that day, the world decided he would watch. The car slowed to a stop right in front of us, not in a hurry, not performing, just arriving, like it knew exactly who it had come for. The engine stilled, and silence settled like a soft cloth over the air. The door opened, not quickly, not dramatically, but with intention. Even before I saw the face, I felt something shift in my son's posture, a stiffening, a flicker of recognition. A memory rising from somewhere he had kept buried. Because the world may move forward, but history does not forget its place in our bones. And as the figure stepped out, the morning seemed to hold its breath. There are people whose presence says everything, without a single word. People who carry themselves with the weight of truth, of experience, of loyalty stretched over years. And this was one of those people. He did not look at my son first. He looked at me, and in that look there was no pity, no shock, no confusion, only understanding. Understanding of what had happened without needing to be told. Understanding of who I was, who I had always been. Understanding that some wounds are not visible, but they are felt. He walked toward me with the slow, steady pace of a man who has nothing to prove. Not to the world, not to my son. Not even to himself, just to me. When he reached me, he did not ask if I was all right. He did not question what had happened. Questions are for those who are uncertain, and he was not. Instead, he removed his coat, a fine coat, heavy, warm, the kind of coat that protects, and he placed it around my shoulders, gently, carefully. Not because I needed warmth, but because I needed reminding that I was still valued. Still seen, still respected. Then, only then did he turn to my son, and the shift in the air was something you could feel all the way down to the earth beneath your feet. My son's face faltered. The pride that had held him upright only moments before softened into something smaller, something unsteady, something shaken, because he knew exactly who stood before him, and he knew exactly what it meant. That car, that moment, that arrival, it was not about wealth, not about power, not about spectacle. It was about what cannot be bought or replaced. Legacy. History. Family that remembers. He came not to confront, not to argue, not to shame, but to stand beside me, to show, without a single word, that a woman like me does not walk away alone, that some hearts are carried by others, that love, when given truly, returns in unexpected forms, at unexpected times, from unexpected places. And my son, standing in that doorway, finally saw it. The weight of what he had done. Not because anyone told him, but because the world showed him. When he stepped out of that car, it was as though time itself paused to take a breath. This was not a man who needed to stretch his presence across a space to be seen. He carried a quiet authority, the kind built not from wealth or power, but from years of loyalty, sacrifice, and earned respect. My brother-in-law. The man who stood beside my husband the day we said farewell to him at the gravesite. The man who held my son when he was too young to remember anything at all. He had seen my tears when I thought no one was watching. He had seen the battles I fought to keep our family upright when the world tried to knock us down. And now there he was, returning, not by accident, but by intention. He didn't rush toward me, no. He approached with the slow, steady step of someone who knows that the moment is not something to be interrupted, but something to be acknowledged. When he reached me, he didn't ask questions. Questions are for outsiders. He was not an outsider. He had lived enough of my life beside me to understand what had happened without needing a single explanation. His eyes said everything. I'm here. You are not alone. And then there was the way he stood, tall, grounded, unshakable, the kind of stance that tells the world, I protect what is mine, not with force, not with noise, but with presence. With the kind of presence that speaks louder than shouting ever could. He did not look at my son right away. He gave me his full attention first, because respect does not look around the room, it looks directly at the one who needs it. He placed his coat around my shoulders. It was a gesture so simple, so gentle, but it carried the weight of years. Years of shared grief, shared meals, shared responsibilities, shared burdens. It reminded me that family is not measured by who shares your blood. Family is measured by who shares your hardships, and this man had shared mine. Only when I was covered, when I was steady, when I was seen, did he turn his gaze to my son. And my son, oh my son, felt the shift immediately. He had grown used to speaking to me in tones that carried superiority, tones that suggested he believed he had risen above the life that raised him. But in the presence of this man, the pride slipped from his posture, because a man knows another man. A man knows when he is standing in front of someone who has walked harder roads and still remained honorable. My brother-in-law did not raise his voice, he did not condemn. His silence was enough, silence that said, you forgot who you came from. Silence that said, you forgot who made you. Silence that said, you forgot what love looks like. And sometimes silence is the heaviest thing a heart can bear. A child may ignore a mother-sit's grief. A child may dismiss a mother-sit's. But a child will not stand unshaken under the quiet judgment of a man who watched him grow. My son could not hold his gaze. His eyes fell, not to the floor, not to me, but into himself, into the place where truth sits and waits to be acknowledged. He realized that day that the man standing before him was not there to discuss or negotiate. He was there as a witness to the moment a son forgot his mother, a witness to the moment pride outweighed compassion, a witness to the moment love was thrown out the door. And witnessing is sometimes more powerful than punishment, because punishment ends. But knowing someone saw your worst choice, that lives with you. My brother-in-law didn't need to speak. His presence itself was the statement, this woman deserves better. This woman is honored. This woman is protected. He extended his hand to me, not as someone rescuing, but as someone receiving, and I placed my hand in his, not out of weakness, but out of knowing I belonged somewhere I would be cherished. He didn't lead me away. He walked beside me, because I was never meant to leave alone. When my son saw who had come for me, something inside him broke quietly, suddenly, in a way only a mother can recognize. The confidence he had worn like armor just moments before slipped from his shoulders and fell to the ground. He had been so sure of himself, so certain that he was justified, so convinced that I was nothing more than a burden to be set aside. But when his eyes met the face of the man who stepped out of that car, the truth finally reached him, not through words, not through explanation, but through the weight of presence, through history standing on the pavement in front of him. The smile he wore, that little smirk of victory, vanished completely. It was as if his face had forgotten how to hold that expression. His lips parted, but no sound came. His hands, which had been crossed in pride, slowly fell to his sides. He stood there, not like a man who had made a firm decision, but like a child who suddenly realized the consequences of his actions. A child who remembered something long forgotten, that love is not something you discard and expect to walk away untouched. I saw his eyes flicker from me to the man beside me. He was searching for explanation, for forgiveness, for something to hold on to, but there was nothing left for him to grasp. He realized, all at once, that the woman he had pushed out of his home was not a weak, lonely figure with nowhere to go. I was not someone at the mercy of his approval. I had a life far older than his marriage, a worth far deeper than any judgment spoken in haste. I was a pillar, one that held up years of family, history, sacrifice. I had stood through storms he had never known, and now, standing beside the man who knew my worth, it finally made sense to him. Regret does not announce itself with tears. No. It begins with silence, a silence that strangles the throat and tightens the chest, and I saw that silence fill him. He remembered in that moment the small things, the way I held him when he was too sick to move, the way I stayed awake by his bedside with cold cloths and whispered prayers, the way I walked miles to meetings and schools and clinics just so he would have a chance at a better life, the way I never once told him how tired I was, the way I would smile at him even when I had nothing left inside to give. Memory can be a cruel teacher when it arrives late. His wife was there too, standing in the doorway behind him, watching. Her face was not full of regret. No, it was full of surprise, because she had believed that I would leave quietly into nothingness, into emptiness, without a place to go. She had thought she had won, but she did not understand one thing. A mother may be humble, but she is never alone. The bonds she builds in love do not break. They return, sometimes quietly, sometimes slowly, but they return. My son took one step forward, not near enough to reach me, just enough to show the ache beginning to surface. He opened his mouth, perhaps to say my name, perhaps to say wait, perhaps to say I didn't mean it, but I did not look at him, not because I was cold, not because I wanted to punish him, but because this was not a moment for words. This was his lesson, his moment to feel the emptiness of the doorway he now stood in. There are some lessons a mother cannot teach with her hands or her voice. There are some lessons only life can teach when it places a mirror in front of you and forces you to see yourself. He saw himself that day. Not the man he pretended to be. Not the husband he tried to impress. Not the adult he thought he had become. He saw the child who forgot the hands that raised him. And regret sat heavy on his shoulders. But regret does not undo harm. And so I turned, not toward him, but toward the life waiting for me. Because sometimes the truest love a mother can offer is the pain of letting her child learn. Silence has its own language. Some people think strength is loud, full of shouting, slamming doors, heated arguments. But the older I grew, the more I learned that real strength is often quiet. It is in the way you stand tall when life tries to bend your back. It is in the way you walk away when everything inside you is begging to stay and fix what is already broken. When the car pulled away and my son was left standing in the doorway, silence filled the space between us. Not just the silence of distance, but the silence of realization, the silence of consequences, the silence that teaches. I did not need to scream. I did not need to point fingers. I did not need to remind him of sacrifices, sleepless nights, or love given freely. Life had already begun speaking to him. But for me, the real lesson wasn't about him, it was about myself. For many years I believed love meant enduring everything, that a mother must always forgive, always accept, always hold on. I believed my place was to stay, even if the staying broke me. But life, in its quiet wisdom, had been trying to tell me that love does not mean erasing yourself for others. Love does not mean allowing your heart to become a doormat. Love can be gentle, but love can also walk away when staying becomes self-destruction. When Uncle Sol drove, he did not look at me. He gave me time to breathe. The road stretched out ahead of us, long and steady, like life itself, uncertain, yet full of possibility. I watched houses pass by, trees leaning into the wind, shadows shifting across the earth, and slowly the ache inside me loosened, just enough to let tears gather. I did not cry loudly, just a few tears, soft and quiet, the kind of tears that do not ask for pity, the kind that simply release what the heart can no longer hold. Uncle Sol placed his hand gently on top of mine. No words were said. They didn't need to be. Sometimes presence is louder than speech. We drove until the sun was low, turning the sky into soft gold, and when we reached his home, a place that had always welcomed me, I stepped inside with both exhaustion and peace. There was warm food waiting, a made bed, a silence that felt safe. That night, I finally allowed myself to feel everything. The pain, the exhaustion, the relief. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears fall freely. I cried for the woman I had been, for the mother who had given so much she forgot herself, for the love that had been taken for granted, for the son who had lost his way. But in that quiet, I also found something else, something I had forgotten. I found me. Not the mother, not the caretaker, not the one who held everything together for everyone else. Just May. A woman who had dreams before life demanded sacrifice. A woman who deserved respect, not just obligation. A woman who had value beyond her roles. And that realization, it healed something inside me. The days that followed were slow and gentle. Uncle Sol would sit with me in the mornings, sipping tea on the porch while the wind carried the scent of jasmine. He did not rush me back to life. He simply allowed me to return to myself, step by step. Healing, I learned, is not loud either. It is quiet work, patient work, loving work. As for my son, days passed, then weeks. The calls started. First one, then two, then messages. Apologies written in shaky words. In the beginning, I couldn't answer, not because I hated him, but because I finally understood that healing sometimes requires space, even from those you love most. And eventually, when the time was right, I answered. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with calm. We spoke, slowly, carefully, honestly. He apologized, not just in words, but in understanding. He learned that love must be mutual, not one-sided, that a mother is not a servant, that respect is not optional. And I forgave him. Not because I had to, but because forgiveness is also a kind of freedom. I learned that day that walking away was not losing. Walking away was choosing myself. And sometimes the quietest steps make the loudest echoes in the hearts of those who once took you for granted.